My name is Adair, aka Adauro, the anointed disciple, always under righteous obedience, and welcome to Adauro Live. This is my impeachment edition. This is also episode 3 of Adauro Live. And normally I'm not very political, but this last couple of months has made me really pay attention to what's happening, what's going on. And so I've really been following the impeachment situation for President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. So, former President, 45, has just now faced and survived his second impeachment. Well, why did we get to this point? There were those that will argue that this is simply a political stunt by the Democratic Party now that they have the House, the Senate, and the White House as well, and because they couldn't punish him during the first impeachment attempt. Despite the fact that the current administration is not actively involved in the impeachment process. Remember, this process creates a roadblock for the Biden administration, who is facing difficulty getting certain appointments in place so that they can work towards relief, the vaccination, job creation, infrastructure projects and repair, and other things on behalf of the American people. Now, we all watched this second impeachment. And prior to this, there were plenty of weak arguments made saying that this being taken up by the Senate is unconstitutional as 45 is no longer president. It's also been pointed out that, well, Supreme Court Chief Justice Judge Roberts is not presiding over the impeachment process. That there are those who say that this makes that process somehow less legitimate. That this demonstrates how this is simply one party's attempt to destroy the opposition political party's de facto leader. And I would disagree with this ideology for a number of reasons. Let's just look at it this way. 45 made it a point to throw out a big lie ahead of time. He anticipated and thereby set a foundational lie ahead of the election results. He spent months saying that the election was stolen once he lost. But he used rhetoric that had been demonstrated to incite violence by his supporters. So he, A, anticipated and thereby set the lie ahead of the results. Remember, prior to the election, he claimed that the only way he could lose is if it was stolen from him. He claimed that there would be fraud due to a number of states opening up absentee balloting in the middle of a pandemic. He claimed that there would be a huge amount of fraud by Democrats. He spent the entire 2 months, once it was determined that he lost, spreading that same lie at every opportunity, whether it be tweet, news report, phone-in interview, or even his own statements. He declared during the election day that he won before states had even completed ballot counting. He asked that the counts be stopped while he was ahead because he noticed that his lead was shrinking. He continuously claimed that ballots were being found miraculously all over the place. He claimed that his campaign had many affidavits from credible sources confirming that they located thousands of ballots that had been thrown away on the side of the road. He claimed that, the Republican ballot watchers were not allowed to be in the room when the ballots were being counted. And when those issues failed, he then turned to place blame on the voting machines used, but only in the states where he lost. Over time, he used rhetoric that had been shown to prompt violence by his supporters. Just think about this. Back in May, the Michigan Capitol was overrun by armed protesters. This was a trial run, and President 45 said that the governor of Michigan should make a deal with those great patriots. These are people who are trying to intimidate you to do what they want, and their issue was she had mandated masking. Anyway, since the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, there have been multiple pundits and party members of the GOP that have tried to compare 45's rhetoric leading up to the day of the attack on the Capitol, as well as his comments on that day, to comments made by some of the Democratic leadership. And even some people who aren't even elected leaders. One comparison is the one by Representative Maxine Waters from California's 43rd District. And those words, her actual statements, can be found on Washington Post YouTube channel. And they're clearly understood. During a rally in support of policies regarding the safety of children, I believe that's what that rally was for, Ms. Waters clearly states, if you see anyone from this administration's cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out, you create a crowd, and you push back on them, and you tell them they're not welcome. And she further stated in a follow-up interview that it was her belief that the people, the American people, would harass his administrative members and cabinet members so much to the point that these members would tell the sitting president that they disagreed with his stance on particular issues. As a result of this, there were a few instances reported where some of his cabinet members or administrative officials were harassed. They were asked to leave a restaurant. Some were heckled while trying to enjoy some private time, usually in a restaurant. There was a second comment Ms. Waters made while attending an LGBTQI event where she indicated she would take Trump out tonight. And she had to clarify those words, saying that she wanted him impeached. Now, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't found any credible incident where the words of Ms. Waters were cited by or resulted in violence towards 45's administration members. Haven't found one yet. So President 45's defense team put together their own video montage featuring CNN reporter Andrew Cuomo and Madonna, as if those individuals represent the Democratic Party's leadership. Last time I checked, Cuomo was a news reporter. Yes, his brother is mayor or governor in New York, but they're not the same person. But look, during all the aforementioned political leaders' speeches and statements, there was no record of masses of people gathering beforehand with documented evidence of plans to perform violent acts towards the government. There was never a concerted 30-day or 60-day period of time that these Democratic leaders talked recklessly over and over again, riling up people to be violent. Each speech or statement can be taken in the context in which it was made. One particular event, one particular statement, a gathering, an interview, a comment, even perhaps several. But never were these comments a common and consistent refrain by a majority of people at the various levels of leadership within the Democratic Party. However, remember, for 2 full months after losing the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election, 45, the Republican House of Representative members and some of the Senate were very vocal about rampant voter fraud. On multiple occasions, 45 made the claims, and I paraphrase, that the people would not take it if he did not win his second term, because the only way that would happen, again, is if the election was stolen. On more than one occasion, 45 spread lies about having proof. And yes, he did say you have to fight like hell to save your country. But he peppered it here or there with, but you got to be peaceful. And follow that with and I'm going to be with you. We're going to march on the Capitol and cheer on the strong Republicans and let them know we're standing with them. But the others, ... Those who responded to his call for the January 6th Save America rally in the nation's capital, a stone's throw from Capitol Hill, it has been reported, came with violence in mind, awaiting the words of the president and signals to be permissive of their actions. It has also been documented that those invited to this rally were the same people who participated in a December rally, a Million MAGA March rally on the same ellipse that resulted in violence, injuries, and multiple arrests. During the January 6th rally, Giuliani is on record at that same rally saying that all plans for the day are perfectly legal and justified. And that's also where he made that comment, and I quote, "Let's have trial by combat." So, let's look at some of the comments, at the results of some of the comments made by Democratic leaders. Maxine Waters. A few people suffered discomfort, maybe perhaps felt shame when they went out into the public, but no one was physically harmed. No property was destroyed. No one was killed. If restaurant workers and the owners of those restaurants asked you to leave, that was pretty much the end of it. There were some comments made by former Attorney General Eric Holder that he made the statement, "When they go low, we kick them." There are no documented reports of anyone being kicked after his comments, nor have his comments been used as a rallying call by any extremist groups. Last time I checked, Madonna is not a leader in the Democratic Party. Now, I could have this incorrect, but if you know otherwise, feel free to post a comment. But her comments were actually made during the Million Women March on Inauguration Day in 2016, and they did not lead to violence. Keep in mind, none of these comments were repeated over and over during a prolonged period supported by violent acts. Also, none of the remark makers coordinated with any violent group after they had been confirmed to have committed violent acts and invited them to another event in an effort to obstruct a constitutionally mandated act. Meanwhile, you need to understand that as President of the United States, you are briefed daily on foreign and domestic threats. That means that 45 absolutely knew about the people who was attending his rally, who came to the Capitol by his request to attend the January 6th Save America rally, and their plans to perform violent acts. Why? Because that would have been part of the briefing. And these same groups had just been to the Capitol the month before, and there had been violence and some arrests. With this knowledge, he still allowed his own son and his attorney to pour lighter fluid on the flames that led up to that crowd's violence. He was aware, even though he feigned ignorance, of the QAnon conspiracy believers within the crowd, and that they would be paying focused attention on his every hand movement for the signal. Also, understand the crowd was only there because he had tweeted multiple times asking them to come there on that specific day. Not the day before, not 2 days after, but that specific day, ahead of when a specific constitutionally mandated act was being performed. The argument that his words were inflammatory but did not constitute incitement of the attack is weaker than soaked tissue paper. Other than the NSA, CIA, FBI, and the DHS, who would have been the ones to brief him, no one else would have been more aware of what was potentially going to happen, what was planned to occur. What ended up happening as a result of a rally that he specifically called into existence and spoke at. So what happened? One lady was shot by Capitol Hill police officers after being advised to stop trying to break into a Capitol building entryway. Hey, a lot of respect for law and order. Hundreds of law enforcement officers were injured. They were beat. Some were hit with fire extinguishers. They were sprayed with bear spray. One gentleman had some sort of reaction and died. They were hit with flagpoles. It was just a mess. An undetermined total of monetary damages was made to the Capitol building. There were reports that there was urine and fecal matter smeared on the walls in some offices. This is all during a pandemic. There was a portrait of John Lewis, an honored member of Congress, that was stolen from the building. For what purpose? The authority of the district's law enforcement officials was taken away, reportedly, shortly before the riot on the Capitol, as if someone knew this might happen and wanted to make it easier for it to happen. Because remember, marches on the Capitol are nothing new. There were marches over the summer in 2020, remember, in the nation's capital. But they were met with considerably more law enforcement presence than what was there on January 6th. Interesting. Now, there have been reports that say that the mayor of D.C. does not have the authority to activate the National Guard. This is something that must be initiated by the president, vice president, or some other leader in the houses of Congress or government. But here's the thing. During this riot, multiple members of Congress tried to reach the President 45, and many were ignored. During the insurrection on the Capitol, 45 tweeted just after Pence had been whisked away that he was a traitor. And then he called on other GOP leaders' cell phones, trying to get them to delay the Electoral College vote certification and to change the college votes and popular vote information. Was 45 on the phone ordering National Guard to the Capitol or ordering additional law enforcement officers to assist the Congress while they were under a violent assault? Nope. Reports insist otherwise. And it is a reasonable conclusion that President 45 was aware of the intent by some of the members at his rally, their plans for violence and the attack. And he knew that certain words and phrases would be understood as a condonement of and an approval for their intended actions. So, it was up to sitting senators who were not only jurors, but also survivors of the events of January 6th to make a determination. Nobody was safe. Anyone could have been killed had it not been for the brave men and women who did stand their ground, who made it possible for the representatives, the senators, their aides and staff members to safely get away from those raiding the Capitol. So, this time the impeachment is really not a partisan one. There are those who did stand up to 45 in the previous time because they saw his reckless statements as a problem. Their problem in 2019 was that they couldn't convince their colleagues of the seriousness of the danger. Some people just refused to hear the truth. This time there were 10 Republican GOP members in the House who agreed that this was an egregious act by a sitting president. Oh, and let's make sure that we all understand the reality that in the House, 45 was impeached during his term in office. He was still in office when he was impeached. The Senate's duty is to try that impeachment and determine whether or not it's a high crime and whether or not the former president should ever be allowed to hold that position or any other elected office. It's not a criminal trial, even though there is perhaps enough evidence that his incitement may indeed be criminal. And there may be additional charges for this now private citizen. Those charges, though, would not be implemented by the decision of the sitting jurors in the Senate. Now, I was going to say that we'll see if the GOP will remain the cult of one dude, or will they take back the reins of their party from someone who set a fire in the party, poured gasoline on the fire, and then just walked away. But the results are in. And listen, on a side note, there are still people who are saying that the election was stolen and that the people who attacked the Capitol were Antifa. There's been no evidence brought forth to substantiate this belief, but people are still saying it. They're still sending across pictures that they had from who knows when. This is the problem with some people in our country. The fact that no proof that either of these things are true is actually evidence to them of this deep state conspiracy. So let's look at what has happened this week. February 9th, the House Impeachment Managers demonstrated through deft reference to precedent, which is documented in even the Federalist Papers, a Bible by many GOP, that the Senate did, in fact, have not only the jurisdiction, not only the authority, but the mandate to, in fact, sit in judgment of a sitting president and a former president. The presentation was so powerful that one GOP party member switched his previous vote, saying that it was unconstitutional, to say that no, it actually is constitutional. And we do have the right and we do have the duty to hear and try a former president. But it would seem Some sitting senators decided, as they did during the first impeachment trial, that it doesn't matter. It's only political. It's only my party against your party. And what former President 45 said or did, they are not going to convict, no matter. We could be misinterpreting the visible and audible cues. Lindsey Graham, he's gone on the record saying he will not vote to convict, even before the evidence was submitted, displayed, presented. On February 10th, the House Impeachment Managers continued to develop the narrative that actions and statements made by President 45 were the instigation for the events of January 6, 2021. I found it very interesting that the parties involved in the December 2020 Million MAGA March on the capital city ellipse, which led to violence, injuries, destruction, and multiple arrests, they already had planned to return on January 22nd or 23rd. But what's more interesting is the fact that President 45 and his administration got involved. Prior to their involvement, that rally would have been held after the Electoral College certification was completed, as well as after the inauguration day of our current president, Joe Biden. And that during that permit, they were only allowed to stay in one location with no permission for the attendees of that rally to travel elsewhere. But after 45's involvement, there were key things to keep in mind. 45, along with the organizers from the December rally, the Million MAGA March rally, which did have violent results, changed the date from after January 20th to January 6th. 45 tweeted on numerous occasions saying, "Come to the Capitol, hashtag we'll be wild." 45 tweeted multiple times, "Stay tuned." 45 continued to stoke the fire, saying, hashtag stop the steal. In numerous rallies, 45 continued to talk about theft of the presidential election, never presenting evidence. 45 also made it a point to now direct his vitriol at not only the Democrats, but also the courts, many of which held judges appointed by his administration who had thrown out, dismissed, or disqualified his 60-plus attempts to say that fraud was the reason that he lost the election. But moving on February 11th, House Impeachment Managers continued painting the portraiture of a former president who recognized that his words held power. A former president who never condemned any attacks made by those who identified as his supporters, even after almost running a bus of Biden supporters off the road, contrary to his supposed law and order slant. Their detailing and pairing of his tweets and rally speech, along with actions performed by his supporters, the pattern was established. It's clearly shown. Especially, again, I harken back to the Michigan Capitol building. Remember, at the latter part of last year, the FBI foiled a plot by 13 people who planned to perform a snatch and grab, that's a kidnapping, on Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, as well as they had plans and made plans on how they would disable law enforcement vehicles, destroy bridges, which would allow them to get away, and eventually, and their plan was to kill Governor Whitmer. Now, after the events of January 6th, Democrats and Republicans alike across the country were able to recognize that the violent mob was incited by the numerous speeches, including the lies that President 45 fomented for months before and after the presidential election results were declared. Now, his defense team, after a terrible first showing on the argument saying that this impeachment was unconstitutional because he's left office, and they took up the podium to try to offer defense for the words and actions of President 45, the defense team only used about 1/4 of their time available. They put together a highlight reel that appears to have come straight from the Tucker Carlson broadcast. And if you listen to the video, you may have noticed they had an underlying music bed that had an ominous soundtrack. This was an attempt to make you feel a certain kind of way about what you were seeing, like when you're watching a television show or a movie and the monster's coming and there's this buildup of music. The House Impeachment Managers held videos held no music that was not already in the recordings that they were able to recover. The defense team claims that the House Impeachment Managers were trying to make an emotional appeal. Former President 45's defense team continued to infer only that his speech does not rise to incitement. They didn't dispute that the former president was involved in organizing or directing the mob towards the Capitol. They actually didn't dispute this. Yeah, the matter of fact, harken back to the December 12th Million MAGA March, one of the speakers specifically said, and I quote, I believe his last name was Fuentes, "We are going to destroy the GOP." These people came to the January 6th rally only at the request of their leader, former President Donald J. Trump, President 45. First and foremost, we must understand that this is not a criminal trial. This trial is a political trial, not because the Democrats just want to punish a former president. It's a political trial because that is the Senate's only power after a president has been impeached by the House of Representatives, or a former elected official is impeached because of their conduct. The Senate has the power to conduct and convict or reject the conviction in a trial of that official. Then they have the decision whether or not to disqualify that elected official or former elected official from ever holding any other elected position of honor. Now listen, you may support former President 45, that's your right. You may believe the lies that he told you. This is your right as well. What you do not have the right to do is violate the law, commit assault and battery on law enforcement officers. You do not have the right to, through violence, interrupt, stall, intimidation, and try to stop the constitutional act of confirming the results of a free and fair presidential election. You don't have that right. The reason that the election was free and fair is that 81 million free Americans outvoted the 75 million Americans who voted for your candidate. That's free and fair. It is fair that you were outvoted. It was not stolen. And I've stated this before, and I just don't understand this. Patriotism is not about overthrowing one election. The actual definition of patriotism is the quality of being patriotic, devotion to and vigorous support for one's country. It does not say one's candidate. One's candidate is not being patriotic. One's country is. This means you vigorously support your country. That means you'll take your fight through the proper channels when it is internal, and then you might take up arms to defend your country against a foreign adversary. This does not give you a mandate to violently attack your fellow citizens who have not taken up arms against you. This makes no sense. But listen, you listen to a person who has been identified by numerous people as a narcissist, and that could be wrong, but the definition is an extremely self-centered person. And perhaps you didn't see that he was self-centered, but I'll point out with a few examples how self-centered he is. Before he became president, he told people at his rallies to hit people who interrupted him and that he was willing to pay their legal fees. Is that denouncing violence? And it's self-centered because hit them because they're interrupting me, not because they have a valid point. Remember, he said he could shoot someone in the street and not lose one supporter. Listen, he spoke to you with a forked tongue. You don't believe so? Let's see. He lied to you about an election that he lost. Remember, he was the one that lost. Many other Republicans still won their seats. That's why it's such the volume in the House is smaller. So and the Democrats barely won in the Senate. It's a 50-50 split. He told you over and over again that the election was stolen by fraud without actually giving you proof. He never won a court case. He claimed the dead people voted. That was thrown out. It was never proven. He claimed that there were more votes tallied in some locations than there were available voters. That doesn't even make sense. That would be an easily identifiable fallacy. And that was never proven. He told you that when you catch someone in a fraud, that the rules no longer apply. Where did he get that logic from? That's not the rules. If you catch someone in fraud, then you put them in jail. The rules no longer apply. There are rules in place specifically to deal with fraud. But he told you you can operate under a totally different set of rules. But he never explained what that different set of rules was. And he left that vague for a reason. That was so that you could be left to your own devices of what that means. So if your predilection is to violence, then that's what I meant. That's why he did that. He encouraged you to march on the Capitol. He told you he would be with you. We're going to march on the Capitol. Then while you were performing your violence, he tweeted in support of your actions while you were storming the Capitol. Some of you thought he was within the crowd with you. You posted videos of yourself saying, we're doing this because of what the president is saying. He just said that Mike Pence is a traitor. We need to get Mike Pence. You recorded yourselves. After Congress was temporarily shut down, halting the Electoral College certification, he told you he loved you, that you were special, and that it was a great day for America. Remember the day. And then hours after that, he told you that those of you who attacked the Capitol would be held accountable. He ignored your pleas for presidential pardons, despite knowing that the only reason you had come to the Capitol was because he had asked you to. He had sent out a wide notice saying, come on this day. He then told you that it's not over and that he would be there with you because the journey has just begun. And then he got on a plane and flew off to Florida to Frank Sinatra's My Way. He did it his way and left you to whatever your punishment was going to be. Basically, Donald J. Trump treated you like the abusive boyfriend. He told you what to do for him, took credit for what you did, but refused to take responsibility. He basically punched you in the face, then said, you made me do that. Now, the closing statements have been made by both sides. Questions have been answered. The evidence has been deliberated. And so, the vote regarding the second impeachment of Donald Trump and Article 1 of incitement of the mob on January 6, 2021 was voted 57 to 43. That's 57, yes, he was guilty, 43 no's. But since a 2/3 majority was not reached once again, Donald Trump has been acquitted. The crazy thing about that is after that vote is that the minority leader, Mitch McConnell, stood up and said that the House Impeachment Managers proved their case without a reasonable doubt. He also said that even he believed that President Trump's months of promoting the big lie did in fact lead up to and cause the January 6th riot and the attack on the Capitol. He then leaned back into the idea that the Senate actually did not have the constitutional power to impeach a former official, even though there was an official vote that settled this before the trial. So he wants to have it both ways. That's so crazy to me, but those are the results. But before I go, let me talk about something else. On a side note, over 250 people have been charged in the Capitol riots. But let me highlight one. A young lady by the name of Emily Hernandez out of Sullivan, Missouri, surrendered to federal authorities in January. I believe it was around January 15th. Apparently, this young lady between 20 and 24 years of age has been charged with stealing a part of the name signage from the office of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi during that January 6, 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol. The attorney for Ms. Hernandez spoke about how she was sort of just swept up in the crowd and found herself in the proximity of those with extreme views and activities. Well, I'm sorry, Ms. Hernandez, but unfortunately, you have surpassed the age of a minor. You are now an adult. And if you had never learned about the difference between a good decision and a bad one, I hope that you learn that as a result of whatever penalty you may pay or receive from your participation in the Capitol riots. Please understand that ignorance of the law does not mean that you are not subject to the penalty of those laws. The laws do not respect your political leanings. They apply to your actions, and penalties are derived from said actions. Anyway, this will probably be my last political post, at least for a little while. There's plenty of more for me to talk about, and I will make it a point, one, to make the next video shorter and talk about something else other than politics. But I just want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing, should you choose to subscribe. This is Adauro Live, and I pray that you have a blessed week. If you're dealing with snow, stay safe, stay toasty, and really find peace. That's all I can say to you. I pray for your safety. I thank you for listening to my presentation, and God bless. See you next time on Adauro Live. Peace.